Well, my clock is showing 7 o'clock. So if Tracy is here.
I am here, my friend.
Hello.
Hello, Rodster. It's our favorite day of the week again.
How's it, Trace?
I'm good, my friend. Did you see my little magic play on
It
words
is
there?
indeed. Welcome to watching. Sorry.
Rodster, I've got some audio issues from your side. I don't know if it's network on your side or my side. I'm not sure.
You're coming through a little herky-jerky on my side. So again, I don't know whether that's you or me.
Let's wing it and see what it does.
Absolutely. Welcome everybody back, joining us live or watching us on the tubes. Very cool to have everybody here, and I can't believe we're doing so much stuff in our sessions here. We've had 8 we're recapping now. It's like 2 months of episodes.
That is a lot. I mean, it's like a load. And you know what's amazing, Rod, is that, I mean, I'm not saying Power Apps. I don't train Power Apps. I know that you do. But it's like people will ask me, hey, Trace, can you quickly deliver Teams training for so many people for like, we've got like 40 minutes. And I'm like, I'm going to train you what color the logo is. I don't know what you want me to do. I mean, what's it supposed to be? So the interesting thing is, I mean, this has been 8 hours, and I know that I chat a lot in between and stuff, but that's 8 hours already. I don't think people realize how much time you need to really train through a platform. So it's just a good reminder.
I mean, they have done everything they can to make it simple, right? And we saw at the beginning that it can be really simple. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of depth, right? You're making an app that you can send to desktop or mobile or tablet or whatever, and complexity in the technology and in the design. And I think we've done some cool stuff. So why don't we go through what we've done and how it's looking, and pull out some really cool things that we've done so far. So how about I pull up not that one, these ones. Yeah. So when we started out, we created an app fresh out of SharePoint, right? Using SharePoint as a data source, and we used the Power Apps wizard essentially to build our thing for us, and it came through in our portrait view here, and we did a bunch of customizations on it. And that first episode was very cool. I think showed people just how quick and easy you really can do this, right? You can get an app up and onto people's phones in 10 minutes. Right? It's really that simple. You have to create your data source, right? We always start from the data. That's sort of our first learning, in this case SharePoint. So you make our SharePoint list as we did, and then you click a couple buttons and it creates this app for us with our browse screen, our details screen, and our edit screen. And I think that was very cool. In our second episode, we then took a little bit of a step back and we went through a tour of the Power Apps interface, right? The tree view, all the menus, where to get different things. And I think that's a very useful, I think that's always the best place to start learning a new platform, is poke around the interface and make sure you know what all the different things do. The big takeaway from that, I think, is that you can edit all of the different attributes in the gallery on the right-hand side of the page, but really it's a good idea to do it using the bar at the top, the function builder and the attribute drop down up there. I think it makes everything way more efficient and easier to deal with, especially since in the function builder, it will give you a lot of hints and tips about what you're building, It'll tell you what functions are expecting in what places, and it does auto completes and color coding and makes that nice and easy.
I think we also, oh yeah, carry on.
No, go for it.
I'm looking at the screen. Did you do some funky thing where it highlights certain things red and certain things green? Did you do conditional formatting? I can't even remember anymore.
We did, yes. That was in our 3rd episode, I think, when we went through and we started modifying all these things. Very briefly, back in the menus and basics, we talked about renaming all our controls, like these are not renamed. Always a very good idea to do that, even though if you do watch through all of these, if you've joined us in all of these, you know I'm very bad at that, but you really should do it. And then in the 3rd one, we did a bunch of customizations on this, one of which was in our browse gallery here. We put in a rag conditional formatting. So we just put a label at the back of the gallery, and then we did a little formula to do our rag status on this. So if it was high, we changed it to a, if it was medium, we did that. We changed the colors in that way. And that was our first exposure to our if statements and all of that, which I think is really. The other big takeaway we took in those early days is that Power Apps runs on a sort of object-oriented model, right? So everything's an object with multiple different fields and attributes to it. So in a gallery, you can look at the object of this item for whichever item in the gallery it is, and then you can find out information about that by referencing the attributes of it with the periods. And that's sort of a core principle of Power Apps. So we did all of that. We did our color changes, just changing the fill on our different controls. We put in some images, right? We learned how to do images, insert them into our app. I think we did a bit more customization on our details screen. We learned about HTML columns in SharePoint.
Single line of text, yeah, got it.
Yeah. So we learned that we really want to keep, if we're using SharePoint as our data source, we want to keep it as plain text, unless you want to control it through HTML and do all of that and make sure it looks nice on the app side.
Just on that, Rod, so in SharePoint, when you go and create a column, so you've got, so what happened here, just to kind of recap that, is that, I mean, because I built the first little crappy form, right? I think so.
Yeah, and then you were driving?
Yeah, I was still driving the first, and then I jumped off the bus, okay? But because I remember I used single line of text for the title, and then I used a multiple line of text, and I set it in SharePoint, obviously it's set by default as rich text editing, okay? But on a multiple line of text, you can also set it as plain text. Does it then still mess around in Power Apps if the multiple line of text is set as plain text?
No, that's what we've done on our other app.
Oh,
it's still a multiple line of text.
Okay.
No, I think we've still got a description in there that's multiple lines, but yeah, as long as it's plain text, it will read fine.
Okay, got it.
It's just the way SharePoint does rich text is it's actually building HTML, right? It's building HTML markup language to display what that text is, and then Power Apps will read that, right? So it's great. It'll do the work for you and it'll read that.
Yeah.
But you don't then get to control what that text looks like, because you can't control what it looks like.
Yeah.
Which is fine, as long as you're setting it on the other side to display nicely.
I don't think it's fine. So if I had to give advice to anyone, because yes, rich text editing is cool because you can put tables in, you can put images in, you can put hyperlinks in, but that kind of starts messing with your data. If you want to start reporting on data and you want to build dashboards and Power BI on it, then that becomes kind of null and void. So I would actually think that if you want that amount of text, I would rather build my app as to allow for them to attach an image or have a separate line, a field where they can add URLs, but to rather keep the text, clean text, because then your if I'm going to call it database now, but you know what I mean, your list is cleaner.
Yeah. No, your data, absolutely.
Yes, people get messy with rich text data. And also the formatting on it is disgusting. I mean, it's just because people tend to copy and paste. So I would most probably rather strip it out to plain text, and then rather add extra fields to allow for additional content they want to add.
Absolutely, yeah. If people are capturing data, I think you always want to keep the data they're capturing as simple as possible, so that you can report off of it and deal with it in a decent way. If you're using that data source as a lookup, right? Maybe you want to display that text on the page somewhere, then having it in a rich text editor can be helpful, right? You can then give that list to a business user and they can put whatever they want in and do all the formatting on it, and then it will display in the app. They must just be aware of what that's going to look like in the app when they do it.
You mean like as a gallery?
Yeah, in a gallery. Yeah.
Okay.
Or to just look up to pull that out into a variable that you can use in a label or similar. Not in a label, it would be an HTML control, but yeah.
I think some other advice I'd like to add for people as well, because remember, in the age that we're in now with citizen developers, we suddenly have someone who has never had exposure to IT and apps and things. They now have an Office 365 license. Maybe there's been a little bit of training in the company. Sadly, that normally doesn't happen. So maybe there's someone in a department, let's say in finance department, really good with Excel, but they can now build a Power App or something, which is pretty cool. So let's say asset management or something. So they can go and watch a couple of videos, or they could even watch these videos and then attempt to try and build something. But what I see a lot of times is that the core skills is a lot of times missing when it comes to developing things. And believe me, most developers don't even have them. So I'm talking about skills like project management, document management, the change management side of apps, because every app has all those components, even though we don't run it as a big project. So a lot of people are building apps and they're not doing the right thing. So they're not testing it right, they're not getting feedback, they're not asking people things. But if I can add just a tip, because we're talking about the rich text editing now, if I can just add something and think about a survey, and I see this so often, people don't always think of the end result, they think of the starting point. And I want you to think of the end result. So I want everyone to, when they start planning this app and this list, I want you to think about the data that you're going to end up with. Because I see so many times in surveys or forms in SharePoint or something that people use way too many single lines of text. So when you look at data, if there's any way that people can pick from a drop down, have them pick from a drop down, because your data is going to be cleaner. The only time I ever use single lines of text or multiple lines of text if I absolutely cannot predict the outcome. Okay, that's the only times. So it should be the lesser of the number of fields on there. But now I want to ask you something, Rod, and I'm completely interrupting you here, but I want to ask you. Correct. So what if you have a drop down? So, I mean, and I'm sure you know that this happens often. So I'm building this incident management system. I've got a drop down for type of incident. So this could be, I don't know, car accident. It could be an oil spill at a factory. It could be a document like quality control issue. It could be an audit finding or something. So I've got this list. I've asked a couple of people. I've got the list of the drop down that people should pick from. So tell me in all honesty, Rod, how many times have you built apps where you didn't have all the options in the drop down that you thought should be there, that there was more that was missing?
That does happen quite a lot, right?
So here's my question on that. So you know what people do often, and we've got to be careful of that though. It's just some advice I want to give, and I'm completely railroading this, but I just want to add some of the citizen development soft skills, and we can call them soft skills, but they're not. They're power skills, right? Those other skills that are not technical. But if I think of a drop down, so the worst thing ever in life is something called miscellaneous, okay, or other. It's the worst thing you can do, but I want to give you some advice on that. So that's something I do, and then I want to know what you would do, right? I'd like to know what you think the options are. What I normally do, especially when it's in the beginning of an app being rolled out, because believe me, you don't think of all the options. And the last thing you want is for someone not to go fill the ticket in because they didn't find the option. And then they're already negative towards the app, right? Because they can't go answer, or they pick a different choice, which is not correct. So what I've done in the past, and not so much in Power Apps, but I do think I would still do this in Power Apps, is I used to build other in. Now, don't laugh at me, okay? Because other is tricky. I used to put other as the last choice in the drop-down as well, and in capitals. It always lies right at the bottom. It's not alphabetical. It lies right at the bottom. So other or not applicable, but other. So they have to first look through all the options, and then if there isn't one there, then it's other. And then I used to write alerts for myself in SharePoint, but you can do this with Workflow here, with Power Automate, is that whenever someone chooses other, it sends me a notification, and I immediately contact that user and say, please let me know, what is the option I could have added for you? And then I add it and I go change it in the data. So I immediately adjust it. So the view that I have that shows any items where other is chosen is always blank. It's a temporary view. Does that make sense? So I get notified. I immediately contact the user. I say, you've picked other. I just want to know what choices there I can add for you. I add the choice. I go adjust their field. I adjust the data so that it doesn't show other anymore. But of course, with all the cool things you've showed us, which you're going to cover in the next couple of minutes, that could be handled with things like pop-ups and things as well, right? You could possibly use a fill-in choice, but I don't like fill-in choices because people just type whatever garbage they want in there. So what is your opinion on that, on drop-downs and cleaning your data, keeping your data clean?
So, I mean, some of that you want to, as much as possible, handle up front, right? So you want to talk to people about what they need and get the list. Like you say, you're never going to get the full list, which is rough. You want to get it as complete as possible. So that's a part of it. If you do think that that you are going to have a significant number of those, the way I'd like to handle that is, like you say, you put another option in, and you can have it where in the list you like. And if they select that, have another control on that page, have another column for other, right? Other selection.
Clever. So it's actually a separate field.
It's a separate field, and then you hide it, right?
Clever.
Based on whether they've picked other, and then you can pull that out in your reports, and you still want to go back and clean that up.
But what you can do is you can pick that with a Power Automate. So you can actually say whenever someone picks other, use the other field and adjust it and apply it, modify the item. I mean, you can get quite fancy with it, but that's actually better to have it on that's better for me than doing it with a fill-in choice, because fill-in choices are the devil of drop-downs. I'm sorry to say.
No, it is. But like if you automate that process, it's essentially just a fill-in choice, right? So I think you want to rather save it to that other column, and then in your data, you can filter it to where that's not blank, right? Where that column's not blank, and you can see all of the different ones, and you can see, okay, this person's used an abbreviation for that, and you can combine those, and that's the new one you put in. So it does take a little bit of
but that's faster than contacting the user afterwards. Look, out of the box in SharePoint, that's not possible. So we used to do that in InfoPath. So to put a filter on, and then it only shows then, and then they fill that field in. But that's much, much better than fill-in choices. So for everyone listening, please just, I'm painful about things like that, but it's because, same as with Rod, I've had to support systems like this for years, and then you become different towards what the app looks like, you know. So yeah, cool. Anyway, carry on.
Where were we? Yeah, so we did do that. We did some changes on our edit screen as well. We talked about color customizations. We talked about showing and hiding different controls. This was our first introduction to forms, right? Like we've got our edit form here, which is full of the data cards, and you can add your own data cards. We talked about putting highlights around controls. If you want to change the color, and you can of course do that in a conditional statement. So if it's empty, it's red, so they know it must change, stuff like that. So we did some basic customization on that side and how that works. And I think that was largely how we dealt with that one. This did a lot of the work for us, and it was pretty cool. It was good. We learned how to add more stuff to our gallery and how galleries work and how forms work.
All I want to know is, I mean, that was 8 weeks ago, and there was 2 Wednesdays that we didn't have webinars, if I remember correctly. So pretty much it was 2.5 months ago that we started. And I just want to know, how did we 2.5 months ago come up with a Christmas theme? Right? How did that happen?
It's rag, right? Red, green, yellow. We just don't have any yellow.
It's like a freaking Christmas stocking, man. I'm like, what the hell? Did you go and brand this one? But you're right, it's the rag status doing it. But I thought that we have like some Christmas theme going. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I know Christmas comes earlier every year, but that's a bit much. Even now, it's a bit much. Honestly.
I was in the mall a couple of an hour ago, and all the trees and stuff is up. I'm like, I'm so sick. I'm just gonna get on my bike and do my road trip until Christmas is over.
It's the 5th of November, really.
Anywho.
Anyway, next up, in our next one, we started building a new app from scratch. So instead of doing it using the SharePoint wizard, the From Data wizard in Power Apps, we started it from scratch, from new, and we started with an entirely blank screen. And then we built it up piece by piece.
And that also, and I think it is related, is where I went blank. So, I was like, what? This is too much. Go for it.
Yeah, so it is a little intimidating. I hope over the last few weeks, we've seen that it's not that bad. Me as a control freak, I really like this way of doing things because I get to tell it everything that it wants to do. So we started with our gallery. So we connected to a data source, which was our SharePoint list, and we pulled in the data and we learned how to start a gallery from blank and add in different controls and different labels and how that all works. Which was
just refresh my memory, sorry. We still did build the SharePoint list on the other side, right? But we then came here and we didn't deploy it from that side. We then came here and then linked to that database.
Yeah. Instead of using, so in both cases, we made our data source, because in Power Apps, you always need to start from your data, right? And that's also not just for the technical app build, right? Talking earlier about those outputs, right? And you see people using too many single lines of text, and the data they land up with at the end of the day is not as useful as it could be. That's why when you're designing these apps, beyond the technical, right, that we've been going through, you want to start with the data. You want to ask yourself the question, what this thing that I'm building, what is it for, right? What are we trying to accomplish? And we're trying to collect some amount of data in this instance, which is usually what we're doing in Power Apps, right? We're collecting data and modifying data. So you got to start with that first. You say, what is this? What is useful information that I'm capturing? How can I make it the most useful? And then we start off with that. So in both cases, we did that, right? We started with our data. We made our SharePoint lists. The big difference between this SharePoint list and the other one is that everything is plain text, right? Even in the previous one, we had choice fields for our drop downs. In this one, those were single lines of text, and we're controlling the drop downs in the app.
Because you're pushing the data to SharePoint, so it doesn't matter. So, Rodster, on this note, I want to ask something else now. So a lot of times on big projects, you have multiple people working on it. Let's say this is one massive, like this is the onboarding process for, I don't know, Standard Bank or NetBank. Okay. Yeah. So it's a massive process. There's a lot of people involved. So you might even have a graphic designer on it. You might even have a BA on it. You could have a project manager on it. I mean, some of these things gets that big. Okay, it's not just one app being built.
Absolutely.
So we know that the way that we build apps have changed forever. Okay, but the basic principles are still the same. If I look at this from your planning the SharePoint list, so the columns that you need in that database. And then especially from this side, so on a lower level, what advice, because of course I've got advice to give as well, but I'd love to know what is the advice you would give to new budding citizen developers that doesn't have that team working around them. They suddenly have to be the BA, the project manager, the change management agent, the developer, the everything, right? The tester, because that's what happens. You still do all those things, even if it's on a smaller scale. It's still that important. if I look at this form of yours, and for everyone listening to this call, okay, you can see that this form's really pretty. The previous one was really ugly, and Rod did that on purpose because doing it this way is his favorite. Okay, I'm convinced of it. But
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm sure of it, but it does look a hell of a lot better, right? But if I look at this, right, if I look at that layout, so the SharePoint lists is one side, and I've written some blogs about that, about documenting your solutions and how to plan your solutions just using Excel. I do a feature mapping and stuff in Excel for those things because it's easier to plan before you build. That whole fail to plan and plan to fail is so perfectly true. Okay, so normally if I build a SharePoint list, I plan it in Excel first. I plan what my columns are going to look like, what's my data going to look like. In Excel, I then plan what's my drop downs going to be. So Excel is a perfect thing for me to test it in. But then also, tell me, what do you do on the UI side or the UX side, or even these days called the CX side? What do you do on this side? If you have to plan this app, do you do, or would you suggest, or what do you think people are doing, to do a wireframe first? I mean, they can even draw this in PowerPoint, am I right? Because believe me, especially if you're new to Power Apps, it's most probably going to be easier for me to do some planning somewhere else first. I mean, what is your thoughts on that?
So when I'm doing solution designs, and I do a lot of those big ones you were talking about, right?
Yeah, I know.
I do that. I wireframe, and I wireframe in PowerPoint. It's the simplest way to do it. Yeah, I do. For a little while, I was doing it in like Photoshop and stuff, but frankly, you inspired me, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. All the really crazy things you do with PowerPoint, I was like, I'm using the wrong tool, right?
It's not the wrong
and there are really,
it's easier.
no, Photoshop is the wrong tool to do wireframing in. I'm convinced of that. It's too it's too much. You don't need everything it does, right? So why do that? There are lots of really good purpose-built wireframing tools, and if you have access to that,
as well, am I right?
You can use Visio as well. You can, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, it comes down to what you're most comfortable with.
But also
when you're wireframing. Sorry?
Also what you have a license for. Visio, we know, is separate licensing, even for Office 365. So PowerPoint is just available for all the citizen developers. So I absolutely love the fact that you're using it. But carry on. You were still adding some bits.
Yeah, so if you have access to and you're used to some other wireframing tool, use that, right? I use PowerPoint. The idea is you want to be able to get stuff on a page really quickly and change it really quickly. You need to be able to move it around and all of that. So when I'm thinking about an app, right? So when you're doing solution design, there's sort of two sides to it. There's the purely technical side, which is, what is the data model? What does the data look like? What are all the pieces? What are we capturing? What are we editing? Who's got rights to what? Like all that stuff, right? And a lot of that is BA work, and a lot of that is proper technical person work. The other side of it is the user experience, right? And I like the user experience term because it's more than the user, it's more than just the user interface, right? It's more than what colors there are and the pretty pictures, although those are also very important. It's about the experience somebody has with your app.
Absolutely.
So the best possible thing you can do is go to the people who are going to be using the app and ask them what makes the most sense to them, right?
Yeah.
What information do you want to see on a page? What do you want to be able to filter by, right? What's important to you, right? What's the most common thing you're going to do, right? That's a good way to start.
Yeah.
And when you've got that information, then put stuff on a page in PowerPoint, whatever it is, and see what that looks like and how much screen real estate you have to work with, right?
Exactly.
We've got a bit more space here that we could use, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to jam pack it with everything. But yeah, design and UX design in general is a very difficult subject, right? Yeah. It's part science, part art. Like a lot of it comes down to what feels right to the people using it. And that's really difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
I think typically citizen developers are in a much better position to do that than proper hardcore devy people.
I think so.
Hardcore devy people they don't think the same way, right?
Yeah.
They are so used to computer interfaces and how things work. Stuff that is just completely obvious to them is actually really arcane and completely useless to a regular user. So
for me, it's like the Matrix. Okay, developers don't have the sunglasses. Citizen developers have the sunglasses.
that is pretty much it. So you want to put yourself in the mindset of, if I am this person and I'm performing this task, what would I want to see and how would I want it to work, right? And you follow it from that.
So
what information do I need here?
Sorry, what I want to add there is that the nice thing is that, and I know it sounds odd, and a lot of people don't do it, but believe me, ask Rod and ask me too. I'm not a super rock star like he is with Power Apps, but I've done a lot of these app developments as well. Is that it's much faster to fix something in PowerPoint than it is on a Power App canvas. Okay, so you can jawl around in PowerPoint to get an idea and say, oh, I forgot about this. But to fix things in SharePoint or Power Apps or Power Automate, doesn't matter, it takes longer. And sometimes you waste a lot of time fixing versus you could have built, because you're going to think of different things when you see it visually, because that's what happens with building wireframes, is to see it visually. And the other nice thing that's great about it is that a lot of people can't imagine things. I get it so often with different projects that I work with in customers. They physically can't imagine it, okay? But when you show them visually, this is your idea, then they kind of get to the point where they agree or they think that's a good idea, or even the user, or I'm saying the end users who consume the app then, can then say, no, that doesn't make sense. That should actually be the fourth column, but they wouldn't know that until they see it. And in PowerPoint, you can save that as a PDF and then share it with a couple of people and say, make notes for me, give me feedback, I don't know. So that really, I think, is just one of those cool things. And just on PowerPoint, Rod, did you know, if you insert a shape in PowerPoint, did you see they brought out new sketch lines?
No.
You know how the old wireframes looked? You know, it had that little bit of a squiggly line.
That's really cool.
So
that's really good.
Go and look at your lines. If you look at the drop down where you change the color of the outline, you'll see that there's now something called sketched, and that allows you to give that like squiggly wireframe look. You know, that like not green now, but that old like wireframe type of apps look. I do that quite often. It looks quite cute. Anyway, sorry.
It does. That's actually, like, if you are using your wireframes to sell an idea, right? That's super useful. One of the pitfalls you can run into making a wireframe, right, is that chances are the wireframe is not going to look exactly like the finished
product.
You're
right. You're so right.
So you want to abstract it, right? So that people know this is a general idea, but it's not exactly what it's going to look like, because that'll make the process further down when a line's a bit thicker or the drop-down control looks a bit different. They don't go like, oh.
Exactly like that. You're right. Because that squiggly lines gives the idea of draft. It gives the idea of, you know, not final product. So their brain doesn't connect to that as being the final product. You're right. But go check it out. It's very cool, Roddy.
I will absolutely do that.
Cool.
So we made this gallery, right? So this gallery we did a few episodes on, actually. We have a gallery here. It's our gallery control. We went through it previously as well. It's got a number of controls in it, mostly labels. We did a lot of searching and filtering and ordering on that gallery to get it to display exactly how we want it to. And that was a little complicated, right? Getting the sort order, getting the search working, getting the filter working, and that function looks a little scary. But if we break it down and go through it bit by bit, as we did, then it's not as intimidating. So that's one of the big takeaways, I think, from all the stuff we did, is how to properly deal with galleries and how to filter the data sources how you want, how to search, how to put a search on them, how to do all of that, which is really, really nice. And in the same way, for our drop downs, for our filters, we learned how to create collections I think we did it on app start. So we set our various collections that we're using in our drop downs because we use it in multiple places. So we don't want to hard code it everywhere we go. We want one place where we can come and update it, and then it will be available in the rest of our app. These could also be additional SharePoint lists, right? Instead of creating our collections, we could make additional SharePoint lists and look up to that instead and control it all in SharePoint. For this one, we wanted to learn how to use collections, so we did it there.
Just on that, Rod, and maybe we can earmark that for another session somewhere, because I'm going to keep on abusing you for a long time. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. But on that, looking up at another list, I kind of like that, like a master data list, where, and I'm not saying that, but would you be able to do, and I've got to remember what it was called in InfoPath, cascading lists. If you had to look up at a SharePoint list, would you be able to cascade it in Power Apps?
Do cascading drop downs, as we used to call them. You absolutely can, yeah. And we can absolutely do a session on that, and we should probably do one on data models, right?
Okay, I'm making a note.
This one we've got has the simplest of data models, right? We have one table. It's a SharePoint list in this case, but it's one table that has all our information in it. You can get really complicated where you have a bunch of things you're looking up to, and then instead of storing actual values in your list, you store the IDs of that, and there are benefits and problems with all of that and how to deal with all of that. We can absolutely do those. So yeah, we did a bunch of that. We also added in images, icons. No, they were images. Here we go.
And you shared that cool site with us. What was it called again?
Freeicons.net, I believe. Where you can go get your icons. There are a bunch of them online, but having nice icons in your app really does make a difference, right? That's one of the ways you take it from being just something cobbled together to something with like real polish, right? Is assigning visual cues like icons and colors to various things. Absolutely. And then we also learned about the switch command, which is really helpful, right? The two things I at least tend to use most in Power Apps are conditional statements, right? So you can have if statements, and then you can have nested if statements like we did in the other app, right? For our RAG status, we have a nested if statement based on the severity value. So if it's this, then that, otherwise if it's this, then that, and you could carry that on 1,000 times. And you can have that big nested if statement, or you could just replace it with a switch. As long as you're checking on the same column, right, the same attribute for all the different options, you can just do a switch, and that is really, really handy. Like that's so yeah, ifs and switches are probably my two most used ones.
Okay.
We also did some really cool stuff on the screen around pop-ups. So you can make pop-up controls in here, and we learned a number of different things in here. We learned how to group various controls together, which is really cool. That's the wrong one. Here we go. So we can group a bunch of different controls together, and we used the gallery again off of another collection we built up, and we're filtering it to show us just one at a time. And we explored variables and showing and hiding things in this way, and in that way you can combine that all together to come up with a really nice pop-up.
Something that was and it's amazing how I kind of like the aesthetics and the UI is something that I focus on more, obviously. It's just, but something that I do remember was the layering of things. Is how you have to pay attention to the layering, because how when you started using the pop-ups, we started having buttons that was overlaying it, or it was not being shaded out or something. So that whole layering thing as well was also important for me, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is layered like Photoshop, right, and a lot of image editing programs. It's the one thing I wish PowerPoint had was a layers pane where I could see what layers different things are on, and I can move them up and down. But
It does.
does it have a tree view like this? I know you can send things forwards and backwards, but can you pull up a list of all the different?
So I'll carry on quickly. I'm going to quickly
we'll have
find
to.
it.
We'll have to take that offline. I'll teach you Power Apps. You can teach me PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that is a really handy thing. And pop-ups in general, as we're talking about design, right? Pop-ups are a super powerful tool. If you take nothing else out of the series we've done, the use of pop-ups is great. To give people information about things that they might need a bit of guidance on, to do success or error messages is really, 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 really handy. People are used to that way of working, right? They're used to having pop-ups in their face. So that's really good. And then the last major thing I think we did here is we did some help overlays. Oh, that's just another pop-up. Yeah, never mind. So you can use the pop-up for multiple things. We added icons in. So that's where we landed on our gallery page. We could also do the rag status on our gallery here, much like we did in the other app. We haven't put that in place. We then moved on from our gallery to our form, right? Seeing the data is important. Capturing and editing the data is more important. And we learned, so we then started a new screen. And we learned how to transition through the different screens. And we did a bunch of work customizing the form, because again, we used a form. At some point in the future, we'll probably, if people want, talk about patch functions and not having to use a form, right? Getting a bit more control out of that, but that's whether we want to or not. We talked about doing conditional formatting and setting the controls so that they show or hide, depending on whether we're editing or having a new one, making them conditionally available, so if we can change a status or if we can't. And we talked about transitioning between the different pages. So, for instance, here, we can navigate between our different screens, and we learned how to reset forms and to change their purpose to whether it's a new form or it's an edit form. So we can use the same screen to perform both tasks. We talked about how you can have separate screens, but then you have to maintain twice as much than if you reuse the one of them. It does make it a bit more complicated.
Something that was quite difficult for me then, it's still difficult for me, I'll have to figure that out, but it was telling it what you want to edit. That was a thing that confused me slightly with when we had the edit form, is that it didn't display anything until I told it what I wanted to edit.
What you wanted to edit.
To be honest,
yeah.
I still don't. We'll get there.
Yeah, so to recap that briefly, right? If it's a new form, Power Apps knows, okay, this is new, everything's going to be blank, and when you submit it, I'm going to make a new one. When you tell it you're going to be an edit form, then it's going to ask you, what am I editing? Because it needs one specific item to edit. Else it can't do anything. It doesn't know what to put in the various controls. When it's saving it back, it doesn't know what to overwrite. It doesn't know which item to update, because there could potentially be hundreds of thousands of various ones. So you need to tell it which one it is. And we learned that when we're navigating, we can pass information from one screen to another. So we can set a variable on the screen we're going to. You can also use global variables. We're using local variables. So in this case, when we click the edit button in our gallery, it's going to send the whole item that we're currently editing to our edit page, well, to our form page. Yeah. And turn it into an edit form. Once we've done that, you can see on our form, our data source is obviously the same data source as our gallery. And then the specific item we're editing is that item we passed from the previous page. And then it goes through, and we talked about how we can show and hide various controls based on whether the form is an edit form or whether it's an edit form or a new form, right? So you can use that as a conditional anchor for your for your controls. And we talked about creating our own custom data cards where we can then put controls in ourselves, in this case our submit button. So that was quite a lot to go through, but that's the other cornerstone of Power Apps, right? You have galleries to display data, and you have forms to edit and update data.
Then also something that was very cool for me was the transitions. I'm calling it transitions now. What is the Power Apps feature called?
They are transitions.
Okay.
So screen transitions. We learned you can do a navigate, right, to a screen where you select which screen it is, and they also have the back function, which will take you back to the previous screen. In our app here, it's largely the same thing. We only have 2 screens. But in an app where you might go deep down a train and then want to reverse back up it rather than just jumping straight back to the start, the back command is quite handy. Or if you can get to a screen from multiple different places, you want to take them back to the place they came from rather than a home screen, which is another like design choice, right? Yeah. And then in either case, whether you're doing a back or a navigate, you then get to do a screen transition, and you can choose from a number. You can cover from various sides, you can do a fade, or you can just cut. I quite like having it swing in and out. It makes it seem...
Yeah, that's super sexy, Roddy, I have to say.
It does look quite nice. I think I've done this a bit wrong, because then it's going in from the right and then disappearing to the right. That's not actually quite what I want. Yeah, let's do cover. I don't want cover right. We'll uncover. Well, cover left, I think, is the right one there. And then it'll pop in and out. Why don't you like that? Oh, it's just called uncover, I think. Or just cover. Probably just cover rather than cover right. Yeah, that's better. And that looks much better. So it swings in and swings out.
That's pretty cool. Nice.
And those little things can do quite a lot to just make the app feel a little smoother, right?
Yep.
One other thing I'll chat about here quickly is if you are pulling a bunch of data, right, and it takes a while for your data to populate. In our case, that's not true, right? We're using just one SharePoint list. There's not a lot of items in it. It comes up very quickly. If you're doing something like using Flow to populate a collection and you're pulling in a whole bunch of data from SQL or something, that process can take a little while. It can take 15, 20 seconds, a minute if you're really pulling a lot of data. And if you just leave somebody on this page with no data on it, so like the gallery's empty, it can be very frustrating for people. If you are in a situation like that, you can use the same sort of pop-up we have to make a loading screen. If the image you put in here is an animated GIF, and yes, it is pronounced GIF, it will animate in the page. So you can have a little...
that, because this whole GIF thing is just like, jeez. I also call it a GIF.
Yeah, the guy who invented it said it's a GIF, but it's a graphics interchange format, so he's wrong. Sorry.
We're sounding like the US elections at the moment, but let's not go there.
Yeah, let's not go there. I'm so glad I'm South African. Wow.
Anyway, moving on swiftly.
Moving on.
That could be a little. That could be one of those little working on it circles or something.
Yeah, like you can pull. There's a bunch of places online. You can get free ones. and just put a little one on there, and you set the visible before you start populating your data, and when the data is finished populating, just after that line, you put that variable to false, and then it will hide. Just let people know that something is happening, and they're far more likely to be okay with that, right?
Okay, so I definitely want to cover that somewhere as well, because and we don't have enough time obviously to do it tonight, but I just tell me, just quickly, don't show me, just tell me. I understand the pop-up thing, we've dealt with that already, but what's my trigger for it to know that the data is loaded for it to then close? What would that trigger be?
What it would look like, right, is you'd probably be doing that in the on visible of your page, right? So you'd set a variable, call it var loader to true, right? And then you'd have you'd have something here where you're calling a flow, right? So something like get data.run, and you give it an ID, whatever the case is, right? Something like that, which would run a flow to go fetch the data. And we know that piece is what's going to take us a bunch of time. So if we do this, and then afterwards we can just set that to false, right? So your trigger is you just, before you run it, you start the pop-up showing, and after you've run it, you do it like that.
So it actually, in Power Apps, it sees that as a little timer job, and when the timer job's finished, whatever you want to call that, then the pop-up closes.
So when you're doing it like this, unless you use specific functions, there are specific functions to get things to run in parallel, but unless you're doing that, it's going to do each one of these one after the other.
Got it.
And it won't do the next one until the first one is finished.
Got it.
So while that's running, it doesn't turn off the loader, because that's true. When you're dealing with large SharePoint lists, or you're doing a whole bunch of transformations on a gallery, sometimes in SharePoint it can do that, but you're not actually running a thing. And in that case, you have to get a little bit more clever, and you have to base it on the gallery.
Like number of line items or something.
Yeah, number of line items. You can just check the all items, like if the all items isn't. So on the pop-up here, instead of having our visible here, instead of having this, we could just say is empty, right? So you could check if something is empty, and we're going to check our, what's this gallery called? Gal incidents.
Oh, and then that's your status.
So, and then that, that resolves to true or false, right? So as long as that gallery is empty, it's going to keep the spinner loading.
Yeah. So see, that makes sense to me. Cool. But we can definitely talk about that somewhere. I was just curious.
We can do that at some point. And that, I think, is the Cliff Notes version of what we've covered, right?
Yeah, like a very, very 20,000 feet high level, very quick touch base, because it's been an incredible journey for 8 weeks. And I mean, we've just scratched the surface, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff left to do. One of the things I would like to do is some conditional controls. So I think maybe the next thing we'll do, I mean, you guys are welcome to hit us up on the chat here, or on our YouTubes, or on Twitter, wherever you like, telling us stuff you'd like to look at, and we'll have a look at that. One of the things I want to do is permissions, right? Yeah. We can keep a list in SharePoint with people, and then those specific people have different access to the app.
Yeah.
So at the moment, anybody can edit these once they've been created and set it to resolved or whatever. Perhaps we only want one person to do that, or one specific group of people to do that, and we can explore how we'd apply that, because that's often quite an important task. Is doing that sort of conditional.
I'll put it on our list for us. So Yeah, that was thanks for the overview. I really appreciate that, right? And I made lots of notes in the background. If you heard me typing away, I'm in OneNote making lots of notes again as well. It's always good for me as well on a recap, and also just using the specific terminology. You know, it helps if you want to quickly search for something or find something. But I don't know anyone that did watch our previous one. I'm going to take a crazy road trip across South Africa for a couple of weeks, and Roddy and I both mutually decided that we'll take a break together, which means that this is our last one in this queue for the next couple of weeks. We'll definitely put it out on social media, of course, when we run another one.
Absolutely.
But Rod, of course, is always busy. I see that you now and then have some blogs coming out or some more videos coming out, so don't stop following the dude. He's got some crazy content there. I'm putting the pressure on, Ron.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I am at some point hopefully going to do some live streams myself. I'll probably just do them on YouTube. I want to look at the flow, the UI, what do they call them? UI flows, the robotic process automation stuff. I'm sure you can all see my little icon up here. So you can join me as I figure it out myself, because I played with it for about 10 minutes. So we can all get together and have a look at what
that's the best thing to do. I mean, that's how I started blogging, is that I shared my learning journey. It's the best way to do it. Don't wait until you're an expert before you start sharing things. Otherwise, you'll never do, because none of us can become experts anymore. But share your things. What I used to always do is say, hey, I could be wrong. If you have other better ways of doing this, let me know. I'm just like sharing my ideas on how I'm doing this. And also, I've got a disclaimer on all my blogs, Rod. I put that in about 3 years ago. I've got a disclaimer on every single blog of mine that says, at the time of publication, this was correct.
Yeah, that is a very good point. You absolutely do.
Because I definitely am not going to go back to 1,000 blogs and update things if there's been a major change. So if anything's major changed, please just make sure, always check with the roadmaps and what's new stuff to make sure that it is still in line, because I might have written it or done it a couple of months ago and it looks completely different now, you know. So I just put that disclaimer in. I was like, no way am I ever going to go back and fix blogs. It's not going to happen. So anyway. But yeah.
That is a good point. That is a good point when you're looking for stuff online, when you're looking up technical things, just check the date of publication, right? For the tutorial you're following or the fix on the forum. Power Apps, thankfully, has not changed so significantly yet that a bunch of stuff is broken, right?
Yeah.
At least in the system, but that day will come, right? It always does. So keep an eye out for that.
It absolutely does. Absolutely. And it's agile technology, people. Some things that worked before doesn't work anymore because now there's new things that work. So that's part of our, you gotta be able to change on your feet, you know, or you're not going to survive this platform, you know. So that's exciting, Roddy. That's an exciting thing that you're taking on there. Very, very complicated thing you're taking on there, but that sounds very exciting. And
from the 10 minutes I've done, it's not too bad. So the guys looking at this will have some fun with it.
That's
but
exciting.
Yeah, coming up at some point.
So from my side, Rod, for the 9 weeks that we've done this together, thank you so very much. We definitely would have some more fun. We might, I don't know, we'll see in a couple of weeks' time. I'll come back even crazier biker chick. We'll see what happens in my life.
I was about to say.
Even crazier. But I'll send you your digital bouquet and box of chocolates, of course, to thank you. But thanks for doing this with me and being my partner in crime and this learning journey. It's been incredible for me. I thank you so much for that. And,
no, it's been fantastic for me too. Like, there is nothing to teach you something quite like having to teach it to somebody else, right?
It is, and we think different.
Yeah, it gives me a new perspective on things, which is always brilliant.
And I mean, as you know, I'm always going to throw PowerPoint in there, so.
Awesome.
Anyway.
So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there for the last time in the first season. Second season to be coming soon.
Our first part of the series.
Yeah. there are a ton of resources online. So while this one is not specifically going to be here next week, there is a bunch of other content you can find on Twitter, on YouTube as well. There's a lot of good stuff. I'll be putting out more stuff, I'm sure.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
And the Facebook communities are also a really great place to look. And I expect some sort of travel log.
Well, you can catch me on, it's going to be on Facebook. I've already started posting photos. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's starting to become messy. Today and yesterday, I started receiving a lot of my stuff that I've ordered, because believe me, I think the gadgets that I'm buying is more expensive than what the road trip's going to be, Rod. That's crazy. Gee whiz.
New toys are always the best.
Oh, new toys. And that's something I've never been I'm a geek to a certain level, but I've never been a big tech geek. I'll buy screens that works for me. I'll buy a chair that works for me. But I don't go full blown like you and Alistair and whoever, I'm more functional, or what's necessities. But when it comes to my bikes and road trips, man, I'm like that chick, just hoys the money, it just flies off. That's crazy.
What else is money for?
Absolutely. Why do we work so hard if we can't do this? Roddy, love
Trace,
you,
thank you so much. Enjoy your road trip. And we will see you on the other side.
We'll absolutely keep in touch, Rod. So I'll check out and see what's happening on your YouTube and send you a little nudge now and then.
Please do. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and see you on the social medias. And other than that, we'll see you in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Take care, Rodster. Take care, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.